I once served as a U.S. Marshal, and now I've decided to finally sit down and write my autobiography. There's one case burned so deep into my memory that I feel it deserves to be told as its own story. Honestly, it was probably the most unforgettable moment of my entire career. I'm no writer or novelist, so my words might come across plain or even a little rough. But if you hear something real in this story and decide to use it in a video, that would be more than enough for me. The confidence I'd get from that would be the greatest reward. It all started late on a Sunday night back in October of 1986. I was stretched out on the couch at home, watching a weekly news roundup on TV, when the phone rang. After 10 o'clock, you didn't usually get calls unless it was something serious. I picked up the receiver. On the other end was my supervisor. He didn't waste a second. "Be at the federal courthouse at exactly 8 a.m., he said. "You've got a task force briefing." By then, I'd been a deputy U.S. Marshal in eastern Washington for 4 years, long enough to know that when something big was brewing, information always came like that. Short, clipped, no extras. No names, no locations, just a time and a place. And the moment I heard the words task force, I knew we were gearing up to hunt one of the most dangerous fugitives out there. What I couldn't have known then was that this mission would turn out to be one of the strangest and most unsettling cases of my career. The next morning, I pulled up to the federal courthouse in Spokane. My boss was waiting by the door and waved me toward the stairs. "Second floor," he said. "Everyone's gathering there." When I walked into the conference room, there were already a handful of people. Some marshals in suits, others in plain clothes. I immediately recognized a special agent from the local FBI office. By a few minutes before 8, the room was packed. Marshals from Seattle, a couple of state troopers, and 2 detectives from the Spokane PD. The chatter died instantly when the Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal walked in, a federal prosecutor at his side. He set his coffee down on the podium, looked out at us, and got straight to the point. "We've got a high-priority case on our hands, and it's going to be tough." He flipped open his notes and went on. "Name's Raymond Ridgeway, 42 years old, 6'2", lean build, red hair, dark eyes, burned scars on his palms, tattoos on his arms and fingers. He's wanted for 4 murders, 2 in Idaho, 2 in Oregon. And he's also charged with killing 2 federal officers. Last year, he ambushed a pair of FBI agents." The chief paused, glanced at his papers again, and a low murmur rolled through the room. He raised his hand, his voice firm. "Intel says Ridgeway is armed and won't hesitate to pull the trigger on anyone wearing a badge. Don't let his reputation fool you. He's a wild animal, sure, but he's also smart, cunning, and completely unpredictable. Keep that in mind when the time comes to take him in." The marshals exchanged uneasy looks, tension written across every face. Meanwhile, the assistant prosecutor handed out folders with the case files. The chief carried on. "Intel puts him somewhere out in the Petun wilderness, right near the Canadian border. Yeah, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack, but we've narrowed it down. A hunter spotted something. The FBI ran an aerial sweep, and analysts are convinced he's holed up on Oola Peak." The lights dimmed as an old projector flickered to life. A topographic map glowed on the wall. The chief jabbed his finger at a red circle. "Right here. There's a small shelf of flat ground just below the summit. Plenty of cover. Most likely he's in the largest of the 3 caves up there. He's had time to dig in. Elevations over 8,500 feet, steep approaches from every direction, and now the snow's started. If we don't move soon, the weather will lock us out completely." The projector shut off, and the room filled with light again. The chief glanced at the men in suits and said firmly, "This is a joint operation. U.S. Marshals are in the lead. FBI covers jurisdiction. State troopers provide backup. Spokane detectives already tied him to a safe house he used last month. We're going in heavy, full tactical gear, long guns, and a chopper on standby for evac or a medevac. His expression hardened, his tone turning ice cold. Let's be clear. The order is simple: apprehend or neutralize. In plain English, dead or alive. Ridgeway isn't slipping away this time. The assistant prosecutor spoke up. From a legal standpoint, you're covered. We've got a federal warrant out of the Eastern District of Washington. Murder charges are already filed. The Attorney General's office authorized lethal force if he resists. We've got eyewitnesses, ballistics, solid evidence. He's a direct and imminent threat. Do what you have to do, just make sure it's clean. The chief gave a short nod and went back to the plan. We'll launch from Winthrop, the nearest town to the wilderness boundary. Air insertion is too risky. We're hiking in, 10 miles to the base of Oola. From there, we split into 3-man teams. Alpha pushes straight for the summit. Bravo flanks east to cut off escape routes. Charlie holds the perimeter and provides support. Weather's our biggest enemy, so we move out at first light tomorrow. Any questions? He asked, his voice low and flat. From the back of the room, a marshal from Seattle spoke carefully. What happened with those 2 FBI agents? The chief's face tightened. He glanced at the prosecutor. She gave the slightest nod. He cleared his throat. 2 agents tracked Ridgeway to a hideout in the hills outside Boise. There was a woman inside. They radioed it in. She refused to leave. Like she was scared, another marshal asked. Could be, the chief admitted with a shrug. All we know is she fought them when they tried to pull her out. And we believe that's what set them up for the ambush. The room went dead silent. The weight of the mission pressed down on all of us. Finally, the chief clapped his hands sharply. All right, get with your teams, brief your people, then get some rest. Tomorrow, at dawn, Winthrop. Be ready to move. The next morning, we rolled out in a convoy of black SUVs and a couple of state trucks. A thick fog still clung to Highway 20, the asphalt shining wet from the night's rain. Ahead, through the haze, the dark ridges of the North Cascades loomed over us. An hour later, our tires crunched onto a narrow gravel road. The wheels dug into loose rock while the landscape pressed in heavy and damp. Pines, fallen leaves, wet earth all around. The road kept narrowing, mud sucking at the tires. At the 20-mile mark, it ended in a clearing marked only by a rusted sign. We stopped, climbed out into the freezing slush. Rising above us was Oola Peak, a wall of gray stone streaked with white snow under a low, brooding sky. We checked the plan one last time. Then the team split. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. Radios crackled, wind cut at bare skin, and we started the climb. At first, the trail was level, just a muddy mess of fallen branches and puddles across the valley floor. But soon it tilted sharply upward, as if the mountain itself was driving us higher through the dense timber. With every step, the cold bit deeper. Soft ground gave way to hard, frozen crunch beneath our boots. Sweat rolled down my temples despite the chill, each breath billowing out in pale clouds. The trees thinned, and the slopes opened. Nothing but shale and brittle grass now. Above us, the peak of Oola loomed, its summit swallowed in heavy clouds. By noon, we finally reached the mountain's base. Every step burned in our legs, and the cliffs above looked steeper than ever. That's when one of my guys pointed at the ground. At first, I didn't get it. A small bird, brown and white, lay dead among the rocks. A few yards farther, another, then another. Soon we were counting them, easily 20 or more, birds and squirrels scattered with no pattern at all. There were no bite marks, no claw tears, no blood. They weren't half-eaten, not even rotting. It was as if they had just fallen and died right where they landed. "What the hell could have done this?" someone muttered. I lifted my radio to my chest. "Bravo, this is Alpha. You see anything strange on your side?" The line hissed with static before a strained voice broke through. "Alpha, this is Bravo. Same thing here. Dozens of dead birds, squirrels, even a few marmots. No blood. Looks like they just dropped out of the sky. You seeing the same?" I glanced down at the nearest body. Small, fresh, frozen stiff. That's when it hit me, a sharp, icy knot in my gut. "Confirmed," I said into the mic. "Same here, dozens dead all along the western slope. Looks like they all went down at once. No marks. Any theories?" Over. There was a long silence before the voice returned. "Negative, Alpha. No idea. Charlie's been notified, but orders are to keep moving. Priority's the summit. Ridgway's up there. Are you holding pace?" I looked back at my team. Their breath came out in heavy clouds, each one showing how fast their confidence was bleeding away. All around us lay a carpet of lifeless bodies, a grim path leading straight to that peak wrapped in clouds. But Bravo was right. Whatever it was, we had to keep moving. "Copy that, Bravo," I answered. "We're moving. Keep us posted if Charlie picks up anything. Alpha out." I clipped the radio back onto my vest, glanced at my team, and said quietly, "The summit's still ahead. Keep your eyes sharp, weapons ready. Let's move." We pushed forward. Boots crunched in the snow, sliding over the frozen little bodies scattered along the slope. With every step, the tension mounted. Finally, we reached the last climb. Our feet punched through a thin crust of ice as we stepped onto a small plateau, the one marked on the map. Here, the wind died down, shielded by a low stone ridge, while heavy clouds hung just overhead. Up ahead, a black slit gaped in the rock, a cave entrance, a jagged crack, maybe 10 feet wide, half hidden by a slab of granite, the only real shelter on the whole ridge. The other two caves here were shallow depressions at best. We all knew, if Ridgeway was anywhere, it would be there. We spread out, rifles raised, moving low and quiet. I gave the signal to hold position just as the other teams appeared from the slope. Bravo and Charlie. I nodded to Charlie's leader, and he nodded back. Together, we formed a tight semicircle, closing in around the entrance. No sound came from inside, only the crunch of our boots and the whistle of wind higher up the peak. I flicked on my flashlight. A harsh white beam split the darkness. Other lights joined mine, shadows dancing across damp stone walls. The cave wasn't deep, maybe 30 feet at most. Inside, it was damp, cold, and carried a faint sour smell. We advanced slowly, sweeping every corner with our beams, and then we saw him. At the back of the cave sat a man. His back was to us, but there was no doubt it was Raymond Ridgeway. Raymond Ridgeway. I shouted, "U.S. Marshals. Get on the ground, hands behind your back." My voice bounced off the stone walls, but he didn't move. Not even a twitch. He just rocked back and forth. Slow, steady, almost rhythmic, as if listening to some tune only he could hear. His head hung low, and the sight was unnerving. He looked thinner than in the photos, his dull red hair plastered to the back of his neck. Charlie's team leader started barking commands too, his voice echoing in the cave. "Ridgeway, down on the ground, hands behind your back." Still nothing. He kept swaying, like our voices weren't even reaching him. That's when my partner Torres, standing to my left, stepped forward. He slung his rifle, reached out a hand toward Ridgeway's shoulder. I heard him mutter under his breath, "Come on." The next moment, Torres's body seized up like he'd grabbed a live wire. His eyes went wide, and he collapsed hard onto the stone floor, thrashing violently. His arms jerked. His boots kicked against the dirt, foam spilling from the corners of his mouth. We all froze. Our weapons stayed trained on Ridgeway, but none of us could process what had just happened. Then, after a few eternal seconds, Ridgway's body suddenly jolted. His head lifted slowly, and for the first time, he looked at us. His eyes darted wildly from face to face, full of confusion, feral and lost. On the ground, hands behind your back, voices roared from every direction, and then he did something no one expected. He smiled. "Down," I shouted again. This time he obeyed, dropping onto the cold stone floor. But that eerie smile never left his face. We bound him fast with plastic zip ties and dragged him away from the wall. Meanwhile, Charlie's medic rushed to Torres. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow, his pulse faint. The medic muttered it looked like a major seizure, maybe something even worse. 20 minutes later, a helicopter thundered in. Torres was strapped to a stretcher, still unconscious, and lifted out with a doctor by his side. Ridgeway was loaded too, cuffed, vacant-eyed, that same unsettling grin plastered on his face. We swept the cave one last time, mission complete, at least on paper. But in our heads it was nothing but questions, the dead birds, the unexplained convulsions, and not a single answer. As we made our way back down the slope, we radioed the other teams and set a rendezvous in Winthrop before nightfall. Still, every thought was on Torres. Later, we were told the doctors had induced a coma to stop the seizures. He stayed under for a full week, and when he finally opened his eyes, he remembered nothing. The last thing Torres recalled before collapsing was that we were climbing toward Baton. The entire raid wiped clean from his memory. Ridgeway ended up behind bars, chained and waiting for trial. He never spoke a word. He just sat in his cell the same way we'd found him in that cave, rocking back and forth like he lived in another world. Meanwhile, all those strange details, the birds, Torres's collapse, were slowly buried in paperwork. In the execution report, the animals got a single line. Several dead wildlife found, likely taken for food. That was it. Investigators shrugged it off. Ridgeway must have hunted them. Nobody collected samples. No toxicology, no autopsies, too much hassle. The focus shifted quickly. Building the murder case against him was all that mattered. The birds were left to rot on Oola's slope, forgotten. Torres's story didn't fare much better. The medical report called it a sudden neurological event, maybe an epileptic seizure, maybe stress-induced collapse. Doctors labeled it a 1-in-a-million fluke, a coincidence that just happened the second he touched Ridgeway. No official connection to the cave or the dead animals was ever made. A week later, Torres woke from the coma with no memory. He was placed on limited duty, then transferred out. I never saw him again. After that, I worked plenty of dangerous cases, gunfights, ambushes, fugitives who fought to the bloody end. But none left me with the same kind of weight. Never again did I see animals lying dead for no reason. Never again did I watch a man crumple into spasms out of nowhere. From then on, it was just the usual chaos of the job, the kind we were trained to expect. I've had nearly 40 years to think it over, and still, it won't let me go. I can still see it as clear as day, the dead birds scattered across the slope, Torres writhing in seizures, and Ridgeway rocking back and forth like his mind was someplace far away. None of it fits into any kind of logical picture. And the worst part, nobody but me ever tried to make sense of it. I've replayed it 100 times in my head. The sour stench in that cave, the animals that just seem to fall dead for no reason at all. I know I should have let it go by now, but just like you wouldn't leave a loaded gun lying on the table, I can't simply forget. I don't buy into coincidences or simple explanations. There was more to it. Something bigger, and I'll never know what it was. That's why this story stands out as one of the most important of my entire career. It forced me to realize something chilling. The same agencies that protect us from dangerous criminals can also keep us from the dangerous truths.